Okay, obviously getting prepared for Utah State, cleaning up Air Force at the same time. When we kind of look back at the game, the biggest statistic that probably jumped out from game one to game two against them was our turnovers. Game one here at home, we only turned the ball over 8 times, led to 8 points. There obviously was 17 for 17. And when you kind of flip that around to what we create defensively, just kind of really shifts the game quite a bit. And, I think in some of these games where they kind of start to get away from us on the defensive end, a lot of it is just our turnovers contributing to that and just giving the other team a lot of easy baskets. So that's something that, we're going to work on, continue to work on again today. And making sure we just don't have those offensive games that get away from us. We've actually done a really good job this year of taking care of the basketball. Overall as a team, I think we're top 50 or so in the country as far as taking care of the ball, and we have to make sure we continue to do that going forward. We don't have a lot of recoverability and athleticism to where when we turn over a ball, we're going to be able to get back and kind of get those stops. A lot of times those really do lead to layups and conversions at the other end. So big point of emphasis for us going forward. Now, obviously, Utah State, a tremendous team, playing really well right now. I think they've won 4 of 5, shown an ability to win on the road in conference play. Kobe McEwen is a special player. He was very special against us in game one. Bit of a different game for us there, just based on our roster and how we played. So I think we're really looking forward to having the opportunity to kind of play at full strength and compete against these guys. We have our work cut out for us. They're a very good team. I really don't know how much separation there is in the Mountain West after you get past the top few teams all the way down. I think every game the rest of the way is winnable for us, and I think every game the rest of the way is losable for us. And we have to make sure that we're playing our best, we're executing our best at both ends of the floor. And I'm anxious to kind of get out at full strength for the first time in a while against somebody and kind of see how it goes.
You mentioned being at full strength for the first time. It's been 10 games since you've had, for a variety of reasons,
Yep.
you've had somebody out all those games. How much has that affected 2 things? One is just the on the court, people are having to play different roles kind of thing. But also the team chemistry, which I kind of asked you about a little bit on Saturday. Is the team chemistry kind of shaken a little bit right now, and is the on-court chemistry shaken?
I think anybody could make a case that the on-court chemistry is, a work in progress. I think that's something we have to continue to work on. That's something that really falls at my feet. I don't want people to think I'm blaming or trying to make an example out of Joe Furstinger or Troy Simons or Sam Logwood, even Craig Neal. I saw some things written where maybe I'm trying to make statements about other people, other things, and I really not. I mean, this is my program. I'm responsible for it. I could have maybe turned an eye to some things. I chose not to. I wanted I want to build a program. I still do want to really build this thing the right way. That doesn't mean I don't believe in these people and believe in them. And the mistakes they've made, they come at my hands. They lay at my feet. And it's my job to find the best way to nurture and develop these young men and our program. And I'm just going to kind of continue to do that. So the on-court chemistry might be a little bit of a reflection of those decisions. But if I had to do them all over again, I would still do them. I still feel as though these young men are my responsibility. They're my duty of care. And I have to do what I think is right for their own growth and development. And if at times that hurts the team, that's just the way it's going to be. So now that we are full strength, I'm hopeful we'll be able to kind of navigate this thing down the rest of the way and kind of maybe get on an upswing the way we kind of have one there in the middle of conference play. And I believe that they're all continuing to try and meet me halfway, and I'm still meeting them halfway. And if we can all come together, hopefully we can still rally this thing.
When you talk to them about chemistry, what's the message a coach gives to a team whose chemistry is right now kind of on the court? Everyone sees that it's not what it was.
Yeah, a few things. One, I think our body language at times is things that don't really become us and really become them as young men. And I think, there are maybe points in their career where they did those things previously and maybe they weren't talked about or maybe they weren't discussed. But those are things that are important to me. The inevitable, end result to that maybe is technical fouls or this or those other things. But to me, there's a building up process. And we have to make sure that we nip that in the bud right away, that we're not a team that gets easily flustered and keeps our poise. And I think the body language is something that's important to me that I think we have to improve on going forward. And the other thing thing is to continue, my job is to continue to teach them as young men and allow them to grow and be there for them in whatever ways I need to be there for them outside of just being their basketball coach. I think a lot of our student athletes these days are incredibly under-resourced when it comes to, mental support, whether it's Johnny Manziel coming out right now, whether it's the Washington State quarterback that committed suicide. I can go on and on about, student athletes these days. They have a lot to deal with and a lot going on. And part of my job, and I told them that after the Boise game, that I've probably let them down, is I haven't been enough support. I haven't given enough support to them individually in the areas that they need help. I've been too busy coaching this team and not, mentally engaging them and making them grow as young men in that way. And that, I felt, showed up at the end of the Boise game. I don't think it was anything technically. I thought it was my inability to foster greater mental growth in these young men, and I want to continue to commit to doing that. Is not a perfect road for any of them, but I'm hopeful if I can just keep chipping away that they'll grow individually, and that'll allow our team to kind of get our chemistry where it's at as well. So I think it's a few different things.
You mentioned Nikiru. What kind of player is he, and how does he create problems for you?
He's dangerous. Reminds me a lot of Jovan Mooring at UNLV, because they're guys that can make bad shots, and guys that make bad shots are really hard to guard. There are guys that if you take them away from what you would consider a high percentage shot, those are things you do. And I think the guys we've ran into, the Welledges, the Dalton, certain players, I think even Hutchison to an extent, we've done a pretty good job containing them. But when you run into those guys that can just really make hard shots that aren't high percentages, they're hard to guard. And you have to be willing to either go out of your comfort zone or sit there and say, you know what, we're willing to take that shot because the percentages aren't great. But when those guys get going, just like Mooring can at UNLV, they can just make really hard ones. So, you go into it saying we're going to guard it how we want to guard it. You have obviously some other things you can go to should one of those games begin to start happening. But I think as long as we play our style and do what we want to do and implement what we want to do into the game, I'm hopeful it doesn't get to a point where we're trying to kind of go to plan B and plan C when a guy's just having one of those nights.
There's a positive side to that too, right? As far as you got a chance to see some guys can do, and then maybe some guys got depended on more than they would have if things were just regular.
For sure. I think all along the intent of playing the style I wanted to play was so that a lot of guys could play and we could beat teams with our depth. I didn't go into this season thinking we were going to have a bunch of guys in the All Mountain West Conference list. I don't think we had them at the beginning. I don't know if we'll have them at the end. But I felt if we could develop our bench and we could really grow the 5th player, the 6th player, the 7th player, the 8th player, the 9th player, and the 10th player, I thought maybe that they could come into the game. Really, as the seasons wore on, ironically enough, those guys that started there have actually moved into our top. I think McQuatch has obviously really had a great experience from playing those minutes. Anthony Mathis, guys that maybe at the beginning of the year, if we only played 8, they wouldn't have played at all. They would have never had this opportunity to grow and get into the role that they're in now. So it's kind of had a little bit of a different effect than maybe I initially anticipated. But overall, it's still the idea was to grow the whole team so that when you go and you play at UNLV or San Diego State or whoever it may be and they have all that star power, that whether you think you can win those matchups or not, I don't know, but you want to win the rest of them. And I thought that would give us our best chance to win with this team. And I'm just going to kind of continue to do that. So I think now that we're where we're at and we have all these guys, maybe now this will be the first time we can really start to utilize it. And hopefully that's going to be the case. McQuatch, I think, has been terrific as far as his commitment, his willingness to be coached. He still makes a lot of mistakes. He played a lot of minutes against Air Force, too many minutes. He played 38 minutes, and when you look at the film and you're about to get upset at him because of this defensive breakdown and that defensive breakdown, you're sitting there going, the kid played 38 minutes. It's really hard to do. I'd like to find a nice sweet spot for him where he's not having those bad possessions or bad moments because I think he can be really good. He's obviously, we're giving up stuff at the 4 position against a lot of teams, and we're gaining stuff, and McQuatch is a perfect example of that. I think he gives opposing 4s some issues, and I think they give him some issues. We give up some things on the backboard. We give up some things around the rim, but we gain some perimeter shooting and some driving and some scoring.
You only had 6 guys last time, and I know you didn't change a whole lot, but you did change some now that you have a full complement of players, is there a temptation to maybe stick with what you did, which on the road you guys had a chance to win?
Mm-hmm.
3-point game in the final minute, doing what you did in Logan. Any kind of temptation to do that now, even though you do have the full complement?
I mean, that was the most zone we'd ever played. You know, I think we played 14 possessions of zone there. We've probably played 3 for the season outside of that game. So I thought when we went to it in the first half, it was good. I thought as the game wore on, it wasn't. That to me, that would be the only thing defensively we did kind of drastically different, because we did sprinkle in the press here and there, and we did get some turnovers out of it. So I think that way, that will be the only thing I think that might we've discussed. But at the end of the day, Kobe was still special, you know, and we've got to find a way to contain him, regardless of what we did in the last game or what we want to do right now.
Just for clarification, make sure Joe is playing this week.
Yep, Joe will play.
The Joe suspension, I know you explained it last week, but we did get stuff written into the paper questioning why his suspension is different than Troy's. As specific as you want to get, can you explain why those two were handled differently?
Sure. You know, I reflect on a lot of things, and trying to become the best coach I can be. I'm by far a finished portrait here. If I had to do it all over again, I probably would have suspended Troy after New Mexico State. And that was probably my error in judgment. And I didn't. I tried to continue to mentor and work with him and talk with him to work on, you know, the things that were going on. And I didn't, and they festered and eventually got worse, and eventually probably made me do something a little over dramatic compared to what I could have done at the beginning. I don't look back and think I treated him any differently for any other reason. I look back and think, man, I should have dealt with that earlier, and I should have nipped it in the bud at that point. As far as Joe goes, obviously a completely different situation. I mean, it's apples and oranges to an extent. I felt Joe's immediate response to me and in general was appropriate and what I wanted to hear. Very similar to what I went through previously with Antono. Troy, in the leading up to it, I wasn't getting that same response, and I just felt like I needed to do something a little bit more severe in order to get that maybe change in his perception on things. And I genuinely think it happened. I think it took more than one, it took more than two, it took more than three. It was about game 4 when I really felt like, okay, my point had been made, and he had seen the teachable moment and took some growth from it. So I don't think, like I said, I have a duty of care to these young men. I try and grow them and develop them. They're all, you know, different in their own ways. I don't think I've treated anyone more unjustly or differently than the other. If I look back on all that, I should have suspended Troy after New Mexico State.
How does your mindset change from that first Utah State game, going in there with such a short bench, to now having the full team back?
It's interesting, and it's new. It's new for us. You know, we discussed it yesterday. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces that has been going on here for weeks. Some, quite frankly, is on them. Inevitably, that becomes on me. But now that we've got to start to piece it all together, we need to have really good attitudes, both as players and coaches. We're going to have to work through some kinks here and there, some difficulties. It's not going to be smooth. You can't just throw a bunch of guys back in the lineup and roll it out and everything's going to go great. And even if it does, that doesn't mean it's going to continue to go great. So we just got to work through it the way we worked through losing guys previously. I think the guys are in a good place. I think we're all excited to kind of finish this season strong. We've talked about getting to this point, and now maybe that we have the depth we want, we have the energy we want, we can hopefully kind of use that to our advantage.
You know, with that said, the experience your team has already had in year one, the injuries, the suspension, the different games, the endings, do you feel like you guys are ready for anything and know what to expect?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything would surprise anybody at this point. It's been a very interesting year, but I've been through those before. I mean, I had 4 season-ending injuries last year, you know, and each one of those could have crippled our team or our season or made it kind of go down a certain road, and it just never did. We just kept pounding the rock every year, and obviously had a great year. And I've never really looked at any of those either. There's no woe is me. There's no any of that. You know, it's like we just got to get to the next game, focus on the next game with who we have and what we have. This is a different challenge because we've never had probably a lot of good things happen at once. It's always been, well, we lost JJ, so what are we going to do now? We lost Jeff, what are we going to do now? Now it's like, okay, well, JJ's back. Okay, well, Jeff's back. We're bringing guys back, and that's a little bit of a different juggling act or coaching strategy than it is losing guys. And that's just something we're going to have to continue to grow at and get better at and make this team the best it can be with.
And the character of your team, with not just the individual players, but the group. Do you like how they've responded to all that?
I've loved how we've done up until the last 2 games. I think how we finish this season will tell a lot about ourselves. And I told them that. I think up until 9 seconds to go against Boise, I don't think anyone that's in and around our program or an objective observer outside of our program would say, you know what, these kids are we're giving it what we have, and we're maximizing whatever it is we have, and we're working our tails off, and we're going to see wherever it is we take us. I think the last 40 minutes and 9 seconds, we haven't shown that, and that's dangerous territory. To now, are we going to lose everything that we've really built this whole year for, or can we rally this thing back, finish this season strong, and say, you know what, we did everything we could with this season. So I think we're in a little bit of a nebulous area here where I'm hopeful we can kind of rally, get back to where we want. And it's not always winning and losing. It's really not. It's more about just the effort, the body language, how we look, how we interact, how we play. And the last 40 minutes and 9 seconds, we haven't had that. We've shown a little bit of stuff that we're always pointing out in other teams, saying that's why we won the game. Look at how this guy acts. Look at how that guy acts. And we're showing a little bit of that, I think, really for the first time in a long time. So I'm hopeful we can just put that aside, finish this season really strong, go into the conference tournament, wherever it is we're supposed to go, and really look back and say, wow, the character of this team is awesome, and they gave it everything they had.
I meant to ask earlier, but with Joe coming back from the suspension, doing what he did, is he going to be a different player? And would you even want him to be?
That's a good question. We've had those discussions before. You know, Joe earlier in the year was a very, very emotional guy. I was the one that kind of curbed him in and said, stop acting that way. Obviously, the beginning of the season wasn't great, and I kind of put a little bit of that on me, saying, Joe, that might have been my fault. I've got you thinking about the wrong things and trying to suppress all your emotion, and maybe that's not healthy. Loosened him up a little bit. Obviously, we had an unfortunate incident. How much of that was, game-oriented or not? How much of what was going on there will affect his game or not affect his game going forward, I guess is just going to be determined. But there is a balance there, and that's something me as a coach, I've got to kind of observe and hopefully react accordingly and make him the best he can be within a very orderly, sportsmanly kind of manner.
I have a question. This has been such a weird year for you. Because,
Sure.
Who you're playing, who you're not playing. And you were hoping eventually to come up with your 5 guys that you really are going to play more minutes with.
Yeah.
You haven't been able to do that. So are you still thinking of that maybe, or are you just going by whatever happens? I know, like, this last game, we got into so much foul trouble.
Sure.
You didn't know what to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't trade this season for anything. It's been an amazing learning experience for me. I think it's been great for our program. The great thing about sports is you have the scoreboard, and that scoreboard makes you go back and reevaluate everything you're doing every day, constantly tinkering. And it's really allowed me in my first year here to examine everything we're doing across the board. And if we weren't going through any of this, I wouldn't be doing that. I'd be thinking everything's better than it really is, or whatever those things kind of creep in. And it's been awesome. From a coaching perspective, you might like to have that uniformity of here's my 5 guys and here's my top 8, and I can rely on this guy every night, and he's always going to go 2 for 5 from 3, and he's never going to turn over the ball. And you want to have that team, and maybe one day we'll have a team like that. That just doesn't happen to be this team. And my job is to manage this, balance this, motivate this as far forward as it can possibly go. I really felt like we were there until the last game or so. And like I said, now we're in a little bit of a weird spot, and we just got to turn this thing back around, finish this thing strong, and just feel really good about what we're starting here.